Anyone ADHD will experience the working memory challenges, and often you don't know what you've forgotten. But what happens as we get older, there's a lot more mental load going on with all of the life responsibilities that we've been talking about, and work and children. If you know you're ADHD and that's what's happening with your memory, say to your partner, don't tell me anything important unless we're actually both sitting down, I'm fully with you, I'm actually tuned in.
Dr. Jo Perkins is a pioneering psychologist in the ADHD space with 23 years experience.
Using her deep knowledge of psychology,
she specializes in optimizing your ADHD across all aspects of your life.
Women won't know that they're in perimenopause because even when people talk about it, it's different for different people. There's not a sign that you're necessarily in it. That working memory can really be challenged as you're going through perimenopause and you're just being told, yeah, it's because you're getting older. A lot of women will get their diagnosis, as we know, as they go into perimenopause and menopause. The hormonal interaction can make it more exacerbated, that sense, alongside all the other demands.
Do you think somebody can be too old to be diagnosed with ADHD? Loyal listeners and viewers, I can't thank you enough for tuning in to ADHD Chatter, where we ask world-leading ADHD experts the hard questions to give you access to the most cutting-edge information on the topic. If you've ever felt broken or different, I hope this helps in your search for information, answers, and community. And do you know what would really help me in return? By clicking the follow or subscribe button wherever you're listening. It might not seem like much, but at ADHD Chatter, it means a huge deal. And with this, I can book more incredible guests and keep the self-discovery fire alive for all of us, including myself. Just one click of a button goes a lot further than you think. We'll promise to listen to your feedback and book the guests you want on topics that matter to you. And remember, you're not broken, just different, and you have always been enough. Dr. Jo, welcome back.
Lovely to be back. Thanks for having me, Alex.
ADHD and aging. It's a topic I haven't covered before, but it's something that's been on my mind. Specifically, do the traits of ADHD get worse with age? What do you think? Do you think ADHD gets harder to manage as you get older?
It can definitely feel a lot harder to manage, as anyone watching with ADHD will testify to, but I think it can be complex. A lot of the time it can also get easier to manage. It's really about, a range of different things, Alex, and obviously your personal circumstances, whether you have a diagnosis, what treatment, if any, you've had, what management you're doing. But I think that inevitably as we get older, you have increasing responsibilities, increasing demands on your time, all the executive functioning that we need to do, the planning, the time management, the commitments that we've got. And typically that's going up while the structure and the scaffolding that have been provided through school, being at home, is decreasing. We're expected to be more independent. So actually, not only is there a genuine increase on us and anyone's brain as we grow up, but particularly for an ADHD brain, it really puts pressure on that planning and organisation and managing multiple things at once. And like I say, it's when that scaffolding's being removed. And of course, that just increases as we go through life. So that it will feel more difficult at periods of change, quite likely, when our routines or our coping strategies that worked once are not fit for purpose or adapted to the new thing that we're doing. So again, that can be one of those things that make it feel harder to manage as we get older. And the other thing, all of the kind of increased pressures and the challenges that can put on anyone, but particularly when we're ADHD, it just means that we're working so much harder to do that, to keep up. And the feelings of low self-esteem, we're being more exposed to things that can activate our rejection sensitivity dysphoria.
Yes.
So, relationships, job interviews, tests, passing things, selection processes, rejections in the real sense, as well as the perceived and in the many different settings that can come from. So that can really increase our, risks of mental health conditions like anxiety, depression, masking, adapting to fit in can increase burnout. So it can get difficult in and of itself, but those challenges then can also increase the risks of other factors that make it harder as well.
Yeah.
And then, go through life.
It's so interesting. Before I got my ADHD diagnosis, I knew I was an alcoholic, and alcoholism took me to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. And in those meetings, people who were older than me in the rooms were telling me that alcoholism gets worse with age if you don't essentially get a handle on it. And I didn't understand that. I thought, how can my compulsion to drink, which was already at that stage terrible, how can it get worse? And I think now I look at life with a wider lens, and you can see essentially the pot of thoughts that you have to ruminate over, the impulsive things you've done, the list of things you maybe regret are constantly growing, and that can compound over years and years and years to create this pressure cooker that is in your mind, getting fuller and fuller and fuller all the time. And unless you put systems, tools, management techniques in place to relieve some of that pressure, you can quite easily see, I think, how something like alcoholism, which I personally put hand in hand with my ADHD, could get worse with age. So I suppose, do you think the executive functioning challenges of ADHD can get significantly worse, or do you think the emotional regulation aspect of ADHD can get significantly worse?
For me, they go hand in hand. Because, and of course, I've probably said this quite a few times, but I think it's really important because people listening to this may go, well, that's not my experience. Because, of course, ADHD and how it manifests is different to each and every person. So the challenges may not be exactly as I'd be describing, and it can get better and easier as we get older and learn to manage. But if there's more and more pressure and demands on you as a person, more commitments, more things that you've got to consider and manage, that's really putting stress on the executive functions, which already are struggling. So if you add more into that, I am going to be overcommitted, burnt out, overcompensating, quite likely struggling to sleep. That we know is going to make a difference to our emotional state, our ability to then perform and function. So it's a vicious cycle. I don't think you can have one without the other. And of course, if we are emotionally dysregulating, then it's also harder to focus and manage our time. We might wake up in a good mood and then something else happens. And actually then we can lose track because we get stuck on thinking about something, and then that can throw us off course. So for me, they're inextricably linked. So I guess the double whammy.
The thing that could change the trajectory of the difficulty or the positivity is awareness. Like as soon as for example, going back to the alcoholism, as soon as I became aware that I was an alcoholic, I stopped drinking, and you could say my alcoholism got significantly better. The same with ADHD. When I found out I had ADHD, and I put that scaffolding around myself, and I learned tools to manage the emotional dysregulation challenges, and I learned tools to manage the executive functioning challenges, then really at that point I would say my ADHD stopped getting worse, and it almost baselined and in many areas got better.
Yeah.
Do you think without that awareness, if someone's not at that stage yet, do you see any common woes with people who have ADHD who may be at midlife? Yeah,
I think there's things you mentioned earlier, Alex, is that cumulative effect. You know, if you're racking up experiences and real and perceived failures, because again, there will be real failures because every human has them, but also anyone struggling will have things that they have broken, not succeeded at, lost, been kicked out of, etc. And of course, there's that amplified sense of failing, even when we haven't. And that compounds as you go through life. So that really builds as we get more years on the clock, as it were, and more experiences. So that definitely is a common woe. But that, again, the offshoot of that is more anxiety, more other mental health conditions. And then you've got menopause and hormones and the perimenopause. So again, as we're going into our 30s, 40s, it's interesting. A lot of people women won't know that they're in perimenopause, because even when people talk about it, it's different for different people. There's not a sign that you're necessarily in it, but Your anxiety can start really becoming exacerbated then. That can be very scary. You don't know where it's coming from, especially if you're not diagnosed and you're not aware of where that's coming from. You can feel more exhausted. The brain fog, that working memory can really be challenged as you're going through perimenopause and you're just being told, yeah, it's because you're getting older or because, you've got a lot on. And you assume it isn't. It's you not coping very well, which of course is a common feature that gets worse as we get to middle age. And then the other woes that I see a lot of as well is that, more sleeping issues that come in and people feeling that they should have had it together by now. Feeling, I should have cracked this by now. I've been doing this for a long time, whether that be relationships, budgeting, their job. And I think as well, a lot of people can find that some people I will work with will stick with something and then because they think I can't do this, and if they're not diagnosed, they may then switch jobs and they might go from different thing to different thing, partly maybe impulsivity, partly kind of novel, but also trying to find the thing that they're better suited to, but repeated failures. And it can just lead to quite chaotic, disjointed sort of traits or common experiences as we go through life. And if one of the challenges that you experience is that connecting with others and having stable relationships, that can be quite a common feature as well.
And if someone is experiencing that and they've had years of evidence behind them of failures, essentially, they've started things, businesses, relationships, hobbies, and that boom and bust cycle has happened time and time again. What can be the compounding mental health consequences? How someone feels about themselves, their self-worth? How can that compounding pattern affect someone?
It can be debilitating and overwhelming and all-consuming. If you have had a life where, again, whether you have actually failed, but perceive you've failed and you've had one thing after another and you believe it's your fault, and you've been told that as well, plenty of times from a young age, and you can point to things that you just didn't do right or didn't do well enough, and they're true, and you are in your head with that, and you're in, your life's not where you want it to be, or actually a real mess. That is, it can leave people feeling huge despair, very little hope for the future and their ability to make a change. And there's, that sense of hopelessness and helplessness. Again, the anxiety can be huge, and it can often as well, I'll see people that are really, like I say, burnt out because they'll just keep running, trying harder to not, fail, make it work this time, whatever the it is. And of course, that the shame, the humiliation, anxiety, and it can affect people in so many different ways. Obviously, there'll be the self-medicating aspects to that potentially. Avoiding doing things that they might want to do, actually might be really in with the chance of being great at, either a relationship or work or something else. But it can really affect that your confidence to such an extent. What's the point in even trying? Because so again, it's that loss of potential, as I would see it, through being so scared to try, and understandably scared to try, based on how they may be sort of experiencing their world and seeing themselves as being able to do it, and not feeling they have the agency and ability to make that change and do something where they won't be a failure.
Could there be a risk that someone who may be, say, in their 60s, 70s, really whatever age, they could have the opinion that, well, they've got this far and they've coped through whatever strategies they've put in place, maybe unhealthily, some healthily, that they might hear about ADHD and think, oh, I don't need to bother researching that, making changes because I've coped so far. And therefore, that could lead them down a path that might not be optimal compared to if they did take ADHD seriously and make some changes?
Yeah, so everyone will have a version of coping, and if something's working, and as they're getting older, it's working better than it's ever worked because of the self-awareness. Again, not because they know they've got ADHD, but they've just learned and they've managed to get to a point where they're okay. I can absolutely see why that might not feel like something they need to involve themselves with, albeit they may benefit from it. You'd also get people, I think, that have gone, do you know what? I appreciate where I do function well. I'm harnessing that. And that can be super empowering. And for them, they may just not genuinely see the benefit of it because what would it do for me? Now, it could, but again, it's a subjective thing, isn't it? Whereas if things aren't working and you're thinking this is really the best it can be and you've convinced yourself this is coping, and then there may be a fear around this ADHD thing, if you're not diagnosed, obviously. But something I've noticed is that when people are diagnosed, particularly later in life, and they've got coping strategies that are working, there can be it can be really empowering, really liberating. And yeah, it's like, well, I'm not going to change now. But they probably are tweaking, but that compassion and that self-awareness and understanding is enough to kind of psychologically calm down and appreciate themselves. So they may not necessarily choose to do anything, but just the awareness of it, like they do anything differently, but the awareness can be quite dramatic in terms of what it does to help.
And what about AuDHD? If we throw autism into the equation, how does that go up against the strains of aging? Yeah.
Well, again, just as with ADHD, but perhaps even more so with AuDHD, the different manifestations of that, depending on each individual, will vary. And of course, how it goes through life and in what bits are activated and how they interact for each individual. But in sort of broad terms, what happens quite often when you're aging is let's say the predictability and ritual seeking and sort of routine trait that, an autistic trait that's there can be more entrenched. And that's often incompatible with the ADHD, desire for novelty and stimulation and, change. And those things can either be at odds or could be really helpful as scaffolding. So it can keep the ADHD traits in check and allow them to thrive through having the kind of routine, the predictability, because I would always say to all of my clients and live by this myself, when you've got that scaffolding in place, which can be a real struggle for the ADHD person, when you've got it in place, it changes your life and you can just thrive. You're designing out a lot of the things that really cause the stress, anxiety, and chaos. And again, the emotional dysregulation that can make our lives so hard. So when it's working well, the AuDHD combination can be really helpful, but it can also really be incompatible. And actually what I see, in clients, you can get this. Certainly, a lot of my clients, they're in business, they're running, they've got big pressure jobs, and there's a lot of discipline that's required for that. So there can be the thriving aspects of that because they're very disciplined, the ritual, they'll do what needs to be done, but then that can be complete control, and then it can be complete mess on the outside. So you can get these wild swings, which can be really disorienting, anxiety-provoking, and really hard to regulate from. When someone's like, I'm like this all week, and then I just kind of blow it at a weekend, and not even that they've done anything bad, but it can be really hard to come back or get back on track after a holiday, for example, and then get back into the groove. But so yeah, it can play out in different ways, I think, but they can be friends or foes.
It must be quite hard if you are someone who has had many years of your life and you've got your certain habits in place, you lean towards habitual behavior, you crave your comfort zone, and then you discover that you have ADHD or autism or AuDHD, and that in itself maybe requires you to make changes in order to live a happier, more optimal life, but that might contradict and clash with your internal desire to stay within your known territory and your known habits and behaviors, even if they're damaging to your well-being.
Yeah, and it's so I think it's probably useful to say those rituals and safety behaviors are not, they may appear quirky, they may appear nonsensical to someone who's not in your world or living with you who doesn't get the routine and can find it quite restrictive. But for someone autistic, AuDHD, even ADHD, they're survival skills and strategies. And of course, they can get more hardwired and embedded, so our worlds can become smaller potentially. But having a diagnosis in and of itself doesn't mean we may have to make any of those changes.
Sure.
And I think, obviously, so I find that if people are wanting to make changes, that can be very helpful. I think the things that can really be the challenge as we get older is that those safe zones and those rituals that we've developed to make our safety zones may not be compatible with the life we're living. So it might not work for the rest of our family or a partner or the job. If you're expected to travel somewhere, you're like, that requires me to do this. Now, that will come up with a load of reasons why you can't do that, because actually that can be hugely anxiety provoking. And that's where, for me, when I'm working with people, that can be where the real challenge lies, because it's not compatible with change. We can become very fearful of change. That creates huge anxiety. So I think that it's a desire to try and keep those rituals malleable as much as we can. And because change is part of life, isn't it?
If you are someone who might be on the extreme end of this conversation, and change does incite huge anxiety within you, and you do have to do something, life happens, you have to go on holiday, you have to go on a business trip, you have to go meet family and travel to do that, can that anxiety create other issues like OCD or agoraphobia?
Absolutely. And it will take different forms. And a lot of the time, my clients that I work with or people may not recognize it as being an agoraphobia or OCD, and it may not meet the criteria, so they're not getting a diagnosis. But actually, I will see people talking in very anxious terms. Something's coming up, and they'll be worrying about things, what they're going to wear, what they're going to pack, and then they've got to do this. And again, the ADHD brain's kind of thinking of all these multiple things, which can be incredibly overwhelming. And actually, a lot of people, will say they might actively start seeking a job or reasons why not to travel, for example. It can very much become problematic for them. So they may start designing their lives to be less needing to do those things. And that might not start off as an agoraphobia and may not end up there. But again, it's certainly reducing the times you have to step out of the comfort zone. It might be that when you're being invited to go somewhere, if it's not the time that works for you, or it's in a place that you're not familiar with, or it will break your routine, you may stop socializing, you may stop reaching out to people, going to things, and become socially withdrawn. And then it's a really vicious cycle, because it's the rituals and the safety seeking that maybe prevented you in the first place because it felt too scary to go out. But then it becomes harder to go out, because the less you're doing something, less confidence you have, and the tighter your rituals become. So that can be both a sort of an agoraphobia, where you're fearing to go out and do certain things, but also the OCD bit. It's just like, no, I've got to control everything in my life. And if I don't do it this way, I can't cope.
A quick word from our sponsors to address a big ADHD issue, the notebook fallacy. We all convince ourselves that buying that one magic notebook will solve all of our problems, but it never does. Nor does the second one, or the third, or the 10th. Well, Tiimo app is more useful than having all the notebooks in the world. And what use are notebooks if you keep losing your pen anyway? Tiimo app has hugely helped me organize my chaotic life by offering the most user-friendly interface an organizational app has to offer. The difference is, it's designed by neurodiverse brains for neurodiverse brains. And you can tell. It's built to adapt to your neurodiverse way of thinking and be flexible to your way of planning. And now it's even more simple with the AI planning assistant. Tiimo now offers an incredible new voice transcribing service, making it even easier to use. A simple voice prompt when you have to plan something or something pops into your mind, and the new AI planning assistant hears it and transcribes it instantly into an easily digestible list of instructions for you to remember. Tiimo is here to help you simplify planning, build focus, and make life happen. No more decision paralysis. The new AI planning assistant makes it so quick and easy to insert information, you can do it before you've forgotten or been distracted. Give it a go and use the link in my bio for 30% off. Just a note though, this code is only applicable on the web browser, not on the smartphone. Then, when Tiimo solves all of your problems, go ahead and use your notebooks for something useful, like propping up a wobbly table leg or mopping up a spilt coffee. Back to the episode. These behaviours that are almost offshoots of the traits of ADHD, can they create anxiety within someone, especially as they age? For example, many people on this podcast, they come on and they purport to have short-term memory loss. I'm certainly a victim of that. Hence the washing machine of woes is my ADHD. I think I always forget my laundry in the machine. But as I get older and I start forgetting things, I could quite easily catastrophize and think that I've got quite serious memory issues just due to serious cognitive decline that I know is likely as someone gets older. So is it possible with someone who has ADHD, who has short-term memory loss, as they're aging, to almost panic as they experience short-term memory loss and think that it's a worrying sign of aging when in fact it could just be their ADHD?
Absolutely. Yes. And of course, anyone ADHD will experience the working memory challenges. And often you don't know what you've forgotten, but you do know that you don't remember everything and things can catch you by surprise. So again, it's a lifelong feature typically for someone with ADHD because of the executive function aspects. But what happens as we get older, and as you say, as we're getting into sort of the middle age and beyond, obviously there's a lot more mental load going on with all of the life responsibilities that we've been talking about and work and children and everything else. So the brain's working harder than it's ever worked. Then we've got to do something with any information. So whether you're neurotypical or neurodivergent, it's only a memory when something's happened to the piece of information. And in very simple terms, sorry, all the neuroscientists out there, there's obviously a lot more complex description. You've got to always take it from somewhere and put it into your brain. And if you don't do that, it's a bit like a conveyor belt. It's gone off. It hasn't gone into your brain. So an example, if your partner says to you, oh, I'm going off to that thing tomorrow, and you literally blank and go, what? What thing? And they're like, we've talked about this. I've told you 5 times. We had a whole conversation about this a month ago. It's in the diary. And that can be really terrifying. And I'll have many clients with me. And again, I can relate to it myself. I trust this person, so I know they're not pretending they've said to me. There's no ulterior motive here. It's terrifying. I have no recollection whatsoever. And that's true. And that's the scary bit. But if you were having that conversation and you were maybe cooking something, the radio's on, you're in your head thinking about something else, you may well have had the conversation, but you didn't do anything with that information because you weren't really tuning in. The person telling you that doesn't actually know that because you're looking like you're listening. Yeah. And they would maybe be able to do that multitasking and hear and do something with it. So it can cause problems because actually there will be, when you're particularly busy as well, because you're maybe, again, the inattentive aspects of ADHD and the distractibility will mean that you're not always going to be tuning into the right things. And you will be picking up stuff, as any ADHD will know, that you didn't want, that it somehow ended up in your head, taking up space, but the bit you did want didn't go in. So it can get quite scary because those things start to become very real in your life. You might forget that there was a children's party. You might forget that you said you'd go and meet your friends somewhere, but actually you're also going somewhere else. And you just think, oh my God, I don't know how I've got myself into this mess. I must be losing my mind. So you do start to believing it. But the difference with ADHD and dementia or the cognitive decline is with ADHD, it will be intermittent and you will still be able to hold memories of other things and not of progressive. Whereas if it is actual cognitive decline, whilst it will be intermittent and show up in different ways, certainly in early stages, it will get worse progressively over time at different rates for different people. Whereas ADHD, when we're not so stressed, not so much going on, our memories probably back to the way it was before, which is not necessarily brilliant in terms of the working memory, because it will just get lost. So, and a tip to working with that, especially if you're with someone in work or a partner, if you know you're ADHD and that's what's happening with your memory, say to your partner, don't tell me anything important unless we're actually both sitting down, I'm fully with you, and I'm actually tuned in. And I'm telling you, and again, a lot of the clients I'll say at work, if they'll say, they told me how to do this project and I can't remember how to do it. I must be thick. I've got, really negative language about themselves. So I will say, make sure you get the step-by-step instructions, make sure it's written down, and then it's not a problem.
Good to know. Good to know. So I don't, as long as I don't forget my laundry every day, I don't have dementia.
No, exactly. As long as you're remembering enough things, and you can test it. If you are, doing something with the information, you will be able to recall it. As you get older, you've
basically got more crap to ruminate over, more stuff to be stressed about, that it's going to interfere with your executive function, short-term memory.
Yeah. And of course, as well, there's a lot of women, a lot of women will get their diagnosis, as we know, as they go into perimenopause, menopause. That, again, the hormonal interaction, it doesn't give you a memory problem in and of itself, but that as well is going to be interacting, so can make it more exacerbated, that sense alongside all the other demands. Yeah.
What about aging and impulsivity? Is that a recipe for disaster?
Oh, it could be. It can be. And again, I think that it's not necessarily. So I would say, so sometimes I think the impulsivity when we're younger, impulsivity before our brain has developed, can be really reckless in nature. It can be dangerous and harmful to ourselves, to others. And that gradually shifts as we get older, and life teaches us stuff all the time, so it can diminish. But impulsivity, in what I see as people get older, and again, whether this is damaging or not will depend on what the kind of follies and impulses might be. But it can be, I'll have clients say to me, I decided to do that thing, like paint the front of the house. So then, went off and bought all the, but you were meant to be doing something else. They're like, yeah, so I had a fight with my wife because then I wasn't there. Or I was meant to be on that flight, but I did that thing just before I was meant to go. So impulsivity can take a different form. It's always going to be part of ADHD, but it will just shapeshift. And obviously those impulses can be harmful. You can make decisions that just can look like a midlife crisis, but maybe aren't. Is that desire to do something different, break out of something. But it can also be one of those things where, because you're not thinking about it so much, people will start that business. They'll go, do you know what? Why not? Let's go on that holiday.
Yes,
let's do that thing rather than sit around thinking about it. So it can be a recipe for disaster, but it can be a recipe for fun, success, great business ideas. So it'll have many, many manifestations potentially.
If you age, and hopefully not, but if you are someone who, well, I suppose we all do, right? We'll all lose our physical ability over time.
Yeah.
But if you are someone who has a lot of internalized or even physical hyperactivity, and you are a person that likes to be physical, and then you also experience this decline physically, can that almost be quite torturous for the person who might have this mind wanting to do loads of stuff, but a body that doesn't let them anymore?
Yeah. And I think that's a very human thing, isn't it? It's hard for any of us as we have diminished capacity and capability. And I think that one of the things with an ADHD physical decline that I would see, at least, is the frustration and that things that would have kept them safe, well, as an outlet, are less accessible.
Right.
Whether that be helping others, doing sport, getting out and doing, and that can be really, really challenging to then be, depending on, again, the nature, if it's more sudden, the decline, for whatever reason, or from an accident, that can lead to all sorts of challenges, because you're stuck in your head. And the hyperactivity can be more thought-based then, which might be new. I mean, it's not unusual for many people, particularly women, to have that hyperactivity in their mind. But obviously, if you've been used to the physical, that might have kept your mind quiet. So for them, that can just activate. But also the things that might have given you meaning and validation and sense of purpose may be gone if that was that physical thing. So it's about adjusting and finding ways. But yeah, it's going to be challenging. But in my experience as well, people with ADHD, they'll find a way to overcome despite the challenge.
Yes,
they'll go,
problem
right,
solve.
I'll galvanize people to do that. I'll do it in this way. So again, I think that ingenuity and that ability to innovate and the zest and the energy and passion and that kind of impulsivity will mean that, yes, it will be challenging. I don't want to minimize that, but also there'll be another way. So if you can't all of a sudden run anymore or do what you used to do, you'll take up swimming, again, in a simple way. Or there'll be other things.
Great perspective.
Yeah.
They'll find the way to keep that stimulation flowing.
That would be my experience of working with people when we're talking about it. It's like, well, I could do this. They're often, they're always going to come up with a new idea. Might not be quite the same kick that they get, but yeah.
More generally, Jo, do you have any tips on any advice on how to age gracefully? Tips on acceptance and riding that aging wave?
Wow. I think for me, the aging gracefully from an ADHD perspective, and anything in life, for me, aging gracefully is aging well psychologically. And for me, aging well psychologically means understanding yourself, cutting yourself some slack, acknowledging what you're good at, what you're not great at, or what you don't enjoy, giving yourself permission to go, do you know what? I'm going to stop torturing myself and others with this and stop pushing through these things and telling myself I should be able to do this and I should like this. That, for me, takes a lot of the pressure off when I see people with that. It relieves a lot of the stress. And so aging gracefully is about acceptance, understanding, and permission to do things differently, but also then kind of caring enough about yourself to keep yourself well rather than abusing yourself in whatever ways those might be, and being kinder to yourself across the board. And that's, for me, how we can age gracefully as an ADHD and become calmer, but leverage the energy, leverage the strength. And often that comes through understanding what it is that's going on. And that's a journey in itself, as we know, with lots of different bits. And there's, diagnosis in and of itself is not the key that does that, because that can be quite painful as well. And it's what goes on beyond that. And even if you don't have a diagnosis, but you'll have developed strategies. And if you're someone that can just kind of learn to accept yourself and how you are in the world, and have been, I say lucky, because even with awareness and trying lots of different things, some people still don't find their thing. But I think if you can find your thing that keeps your brain occupied and fed, it's unbelievably helpful. And it's a privilege when you've got that, because your brain is directed in a healthy way. It feels satisfied, so it's less likely to ruminate on the negative, harmful thoughts and the what ifs, the bad stuff that we say about ourselves. So that's all really painful aging versus aging gracefully.
The thing I'm worried about, Jo, I think, is aging and losing control. I think particularly someone like myself and many people I've spoken to, we like to have control over many areas of our lives, particularly because the standard that I like to keep is so high. It's almost that perfectionist inside me. And I feel like as I get older, I'm going to lose the ability to maintain that standard through maybe physical decline, mental decline. But do you think, to ease that panic almost, it's better to almost accept that time is the only thing that is in control?
For me, I think there's a giving up to the forces that we can't do anything with. And I'll often say to my clients, look, control healthily what you can, just let go of everything else, which of course we know we can't just let go. But when we relinquish control, because of course control, Alex, can take different forms, but that perfectionism, a lot of that is a safety mechanism, isn't it?
Yes,
because you have to do that to rely on yourself and design out all the things that could go wrong and destabilize you and keep you well. So that you won't and don't have to lose control of, but actually the time bit, there's a comfort almost to going, do you know what? Whatever I do, that's happening. And there's something very humbling about that. And when we stop trying to control, things get easier, actually. So that for me is it becomes much healthier and easier, less pressure. And it's not control we need, it's management, awareness, and trusting ourselves. Like you can trust yourself that you're going to do things to a high standard.
Hopefully.
Again, whether we believe we can trust ourselves,
Yes.
and again, it's another thing. But I think it can be quite liberating.
It's interesting. I think because I almost always live in the now, it's what's in front of me is my hyperfocus. If something's out of my sight, it's out of my mind and sort of ceases to exist. I've mentioned this before. And for me, the future, or the idea of the future, is so abstract. I find it incredibly difficult to plan for the future. And therefore, to me, the thought of aging and going into that unknown is quite terrifying. Do you think there's a fear there of people with ADHD, many of whom I know relate to this concept of living in the now? Do you think there's this fear of getting older because they find it so hard to plan for the future?
Yes. Yes. But for me, there's some interesting things around this area, because being in the here and now, we know, is a feature of an ADHD brain in and of itself. And there's a lot of great stuff like that, about that. But of course, by the very nature, if you're in the here and now, you're not thinking of the future. And that, as anyone with ADHD will know, that can be, I'm not going to go out tonight because I've got a big thing at work tomorrow. I've got to be somewhere. You go for that one drink. You completely forgot that you've got the thing tomorrow, and you find that you've stayed out late, messed up the next day, spent the budget, all that stuff. So it's a feature that anyone with ADHD will relate to in some, large extent. But of course, as we get older, we become much more aware as we age that the future's inevitably getting shorter, and we keep ignoring it. So we get reminders as we're getting older, whether that's caring for an elderly parent, relative, friends. We're confronted with frailty. So there's less opportunity to be in denial. We get dragged out of the here and now through those quite scary events. You're hearing on the news, the cost of living crisis, pensions, all of that. That can be terrifying and very boring as well for an ADHD. It's like, not only is it, we're not wired to think like that, it's like, what, really? Tomorrow, rainy day funds, pension? So that then gets real. You don't tend to think about that in your 20s. It's when you're going, oh my gosh, no, I'm actually kind of like the mortgage of this. It's like, oh gosh, what happens if I lose my job? What happens if I can't earn money and not physically able? So we do get confronted with that, and it gets increasingly, obvious that we need to. So what's interesting to me is when different people react in different ways. Some people will really avoid leaning into that and go more into the here and now because it's too overwhelming and terrifying.
Yes.
That creates more anxiety, and it almost can become quite phobic. It's like, don't talk to me, and they will shut a conversation down. It's like, can't, no, let's change the subject. Then I also speak to a lot of ADHDs that they're just also not really, there's futures there, but there's this optimism that, well, I don't actually want to stop doing anything because I've got 15, 20 businesses, lifetimes that I could live. So I'm not really worried about how I'm going to survive at 65 because I'll still work. I'll still have things. And there's this optimism that can be well placed or not. So that means that they're not actually that fearful of that, the planning bit. And actually some of the fear can be, supposing it all ends before I've done everything I've got in my mind to do. And that can actually be very anxiety provoking genuinely, but it can also be very galvanizing. I better get on with it then. Better get on with it now. And again, I'll often not really hear a lot of my ADHD clients talk about aging per se. It's not that it's not there for them, but there's a sort of zest and a sense that forever youngness. And always like, what would I do later in life? Anyway, that's in a whole, I can't imagine not doing something. So again, that can also mean that the anxiety about not planning for the future isn't so present as maybe someone neurotypical as well, because they're like, well, no, I'm really thinking, have I got enough money? They may actually have it much more present in the here and now, but are also more likely to be preparing for it, perhaps, as well.
Can agoraphobia be mental? I know I think of agoraphobia as a physical fear of stepping outside your, stereotypically, your home, your comfort zone. But can it be a phobia of stepping outside your here and the now? Like the thought of planning for the future or even considering the future is so fearful?
Yeah, well, again, technically, I don't know what phobia that would be, but it would be definitely avoidant and phobic in that I can't actually talk about it. So it'd be definitely, in your head. And the anxiety that is, agoraphobia is an anxiety-based disorder, and it would be very much fear of, and that is stepping out, and that's how it manifests. It would be a version of that, and there may be an actual phobia name for that. I don't happen to know it, but yeah, absolutely. I mean, some clients some topics are just off limits until they're ready, of course. Can't talk about it. No. They just will not. And it can be that I've known, but they won't go to a funeral, they don't want to go to the doctors, they don't want to engage, they don't want to watch a film with anything too serious or mortality based. So yeah, no, it can, and that would be bordering on phobic or actually phobic, depending on the extent to which it's playing out and influencing their choices.
What about shame? Does that wear off as you age? Do you stop caring as you get older what other people think?
Yes. So I think the shame for anyone, shame generally, it's always there. I think that a way of describing it, and if I think about clients and any of our own experiences, myself included, it's there, but as we get older and certainly understand ourselves, and this is where with ADHD as well, a diagnosis can kind of shift that from being shame to through understanding and compassion to go, I don't need to be ashamed of that. So that can definitely reduce the shame, so it doesn't sort of solidify. But what often happens is the shame is there and can be activated very easily under the right circumstances. What can often happen is, as we get older, understand ourselves and have less things that make us feel shame because we're doing better at things, if that's the case, of course. So actually, shame is just more of a small pool that can be, stirred up, but isn't permanently flowing, if you like. So it's there, but it softens or becomes less frequently activated. And when it's live, it can feel like it's never gone away. It's as real as ever. But I think we just get less situations. If we're managing ADHD and we're living a life where we're coping, then the shame just isn't being activated by new stuff. Because that's the really compounding one. It's like, oh my gosh, done that thing, So that's where when someone isn't managing their ADHD or they've got other things going on, it can really be very present at any age because still here. Oh, here we go again. But if you're managing it, so it can definitely shift. And generally as we get older, we do not care what people think. That's one of the huge benefits of aging. It's not that we, some people will always care to an extent. Some people won't care much at all. That's liberating. Because actually, so what? So if I've embarrassed myself on that thing, you don't go home thinking everyone's going to talk about you. Or if they do, because that's where your head goes and you've analysed it, come to that conclusion, you're not actually invested in what is said about you. You're like, yeah, so what? What's the worst that can happen? Yeah, they said I, made a fool of myself, or I got drunk, or I said the wrong thing, or I didn't do a good presentation. You're not as invested in it. So that is how the shame can be helped by that people-pleasing. You're less likely to be triggered into it.
What about people-pleasing? Do you think people-pleasing evaporates as you get older?
I think I don't know if it evaporates. I think for some people it definitely does. And I think that, again, evaporate can be quite quick. I think it's probably a longer process in reality, as we'll know. But I think that some people just go, yeah, I know what I need to do. I will do the right thing. I don't overcommit. And actually, by not people-pleasing, they actually, interestingly, tend to please more people because they're not letting everyone down because they've overcommitted trying to people-please. But once you understand yourself and your ADHD, and particularly as you get older, you just go, do you know what, that just doesn't work for me to go all the way over there to visit that person because I feel like I should, or to help someone else out, because actually my time is best spent here, or my energy needs to be directed here rather than squandered. And that is possible when we get to know ourselves better. That helps us stop people-pleasing, but also not needing to people-please because we've kind of got our tribe, got our life sorted in whatever way that looks. There's less people that we're trying to please. It can just feel a lot easier. And the less you do it, I don't think you're inclined to, but can get activated. It's always interesting. If someone starts people-pleasing after a period of not, I'll always say, what's going on in that dynamic?
Right,
You're trying to impress them, are they making you feel bad? What's going on? Don't launch into the people-pleasing. So once it starts to drop away, it can be really helpful when you notice it happening, going, oh, something's going on here. I'm noticing myself offering to do stuff that, why?
For me, one of the biggest sources of shame is RSD. We did a fantastic episode with yourself on that topic. And people-pleasing, ironically, is the thing that I used to do in order to protect myself from the RSD. Yeah. I can't be triggered. I can't upset anyone if I just say yes and don't offend anyone. But actually, ironically, it's learning how to say no and just putting that pause between the ask or can I let you know tomorrow, limiting my people-pleasing that has enabled me to be more confident, which has in turn diluted the impact of RSD when it strikes. Because it still does. I'm 36 and it still is as viscerally painful as it was from my first memory of it when I was about 4, I remember. But the awareness helps so much because you can remind yourself in those moments that this is going on, you know why this is going on, that you're not broken, you're just different, and there's a reason why you're feeling these intense feelings. And I think as you get older, you get better at reminding yourself in those critical moments that what you're feeling isn't your fault. And that actually goes a long way to stripping away the shame.
Huge. Yeah. I mean, you've articulated it beautifully, Alex. It's exactly that. And I think there's this thing where the irony is, as you've said, you know, the more you try and people please to protect yourself and to not let people down and kind of ingratiate yourself, it's exhausting. You end up much more likely over-promising and under-delivering. So you get yourself in a right pickle where you say, I'll do these 10 things, and you're either really resentful, actually, that it was your fault, but you still think, why am I doing this? So you get angry, so you fall out with people. But also you get burnout, and actually you're more likely, I mean, you know, I'll speak to clients and they go, I knew I shouldn't have said yes. I knew I couldn't fit it in. Then I went along and then I got absolutely roaring drunk, made, you know, a mistake because then I fed out with that person and kicked the cat when I got out, you know, that sort of thing. And it's like, and of course, feeling the very thing trying to avoid. You didn't please anyone. No one actually needed you to be there. It was an invite. You were allowed to say no. And just kind of knowing that is an amazing life skill, which many people that I work with will say, why is this so hard to do? Because again, it's pretty hardwired to you've asked, of course I'll go, you know, I should. Lots of shoulds, lots of musts. But when you can free yourself from that, A, you're not putting yourself in those situations, you're less exhausted, and you get more confident. And you realize the world doesn't fall apart when you say, no, I can't do that. Actually, people respect you. So, okay. You're not doing the last minute cancellation or herring up late and then leaving after half an hour because you've got another thing you've got to go to. And people are like, why did you even bother? That's worse than just saying, when the invite comes in, I can't make that, but have a great day. Or I hope the meeting goes well. I'll send someone else on my behalf. But we learn that as we go.
How does ADHD and menopause intertwine?
Yeah, so this, as we said, menopause, as we know, certainly for women who haven't been diagnosed prior to that point, as we know, many girls get lost in the system and are always the ones that will get the sort of late diagnosis as a woman, typically. And that's often around the peri-stroke menopause time, because that interaction of the hormonal changes really do affect our brain. And our brain is already wired in a particular way, and it struggles, obviously, with the executive functions, the emotional regulation. So when your hormones start changing, because that's obviously what's happening, and it happens in young women as well. And again, it's not always clear. It gets certain with ADHD girls, if they're not diagnosed, but even if they are, it's put down to PMT. But the brain is affected differently at different points in the cycle, and we know that. And it's can make it really the week. I think it's the week before your cycle. Again, you've had a great episode recently, I know, with Dr. Louise Newson talking about hormones. So, it's not my area of expertise, but I certainly work with it. And as a woman, you'll see things just feel very chaotic, active, struggle to sleep in the week leading up to your cycle. And then after your period, things calm down again. So that can happen. And medication can be shifted and modified as a consequence for that. So the same is happening down the line at perimenopause and menopause. So it's affecting your brain. So you will genuinely have, and different women will have different symptoms, but it will affect memory. A lot of the time, I will see a lot of women going through this stage, and it's a long stage. It lasts years. Not the menopause bit, but, the perimenopause. You often don't know you're in it. And it will be that women are saying, I've got extreme anxiety, and they'll get misdiagnosed. It's not that they don't have anxiety when they go to the doctors, but that will be the diagnosis. And here's some medication for anxiety, which is not going to the root of the problem, because that might be HRT or other management techniques or ADHD medication, or if they've already got ADHD medication, modifying that as they're going through their cycle. And that makes a big difference. So a lot of the time as well, more sleep issues will kick in around menopause, because again, that's affecting our brain, our body, and our system. So a lot of people who may not have had that many challenges with sleep will, as they start to hit perimenopause, that's often the time when women will say to me, oh my gosh, I'm awake all night. Just busy head, I'm struggling. And you can often just get fobbed off. Well, of course, you've got a lot going on. You've got young children, if that's the case, or a big job, or you've got a lot on your plate. Whereas if you were aware that it was the ADHD, you would do things differently. And it's not that you won't have some kind of challenges, but it doesn't have to be this hard. So it's having a very significant interaction with the ADHD symptoms, challenges, and traits. So it just exacerbates those for over years, and it can feel very disorienting.
Is there anything someone could do to prepare themselves for the menopause? And I appreciate it's a big question, but particularly emotional. Is there any emotional scaffolding someone could put around themselves as they're approaching the menopause?
Yeah. So I would say, there's a whole range of things that I would encourage anyone going through middle life, as they approach, but particularly with menopause, because again, you go into it and it goes over years, the perimenopause. So I would say education, find out, firstly, track your own body, track your own symptoms, cycle, start keeping a diary, noticing what's going on. Don't gaslight yourself and assume that you're just tired this morning. If you're struggling to sleep for 3-4 days, where are you at in your cycle? It might not make any sense for a number of months, but track it. Educate yourself by watching other episodes of this podcast, doing the reading. Thankfully, there's a lot more now that we can find out about the role of hormones and the interaction. So you can start spotting, because it isn't just hot flushes. It's not just you might get an irregular cycle. You may not. There's so many other things. It's not just brain fog. There's lots of things. So educate yourself about the interaction. I also think you can never start too early. If you're not someone that already has quite good scaffolding and a routine and a proactive approach to your health, I would say one of the most important things alongside the education piece is really understanding the importance of sleep, exercise, nutrition, balancing your energy, not people-pleasing and overstretching, learning to say no, not just going, I'm going to feel rubbish because I'm getting older or I've got anxiety. Don't just think it's that. We can do so much more, but it gets harder as we get further into perimenopause and menopause. And if we're not thinking we can do anything about it, if we don't fancy going to the gym and there's no time, why would we start? So find something that works for you. And also what I see a lot as well with women, if they've always been training, let's say, and they might do particular kind of training, they might not be enjoying that. That might be becoming more painful. It might not be, their body might be almost telling them, don't do it so hardcore. So listen to your body and what it's telling you. And it might be that during your cycle, you do different things at different times. And if you're feeling like you need to stretch or do more strength or Pilates or whatever, walking, listen to it, be flexible with your routine. And it can be really tough because obviously as you're getting older and going through perimenopause, your body's changing. So actually sometimes you want to do more of the things that are going to give you the quick fix, what you've always done. And it can be a real challenge to do things that are different and new and not what you're used to. But I would say tune into your body, adapt, routines, but eat for vitality, prioritize health, really manage your alcohol intake, caffeine, all the stimulants that many of us will rely on and use, can creep up on us being a habit, and it can really put a havoc with your anxiety. Certainly alcohol really further impacts your sleep. And even a glass or 2 glasses of wine that might have before been quite pleasurable can really knock you out of whack. And even addressing things in those ways can make a huge difference to how we feel emotionally and how we feel physically. And going in strong will be of huge help.
Amazing. Thank you, Jo.
Pleasure.
Just one more question before we move on to the ADHD agony aunt section. Do you think somebody can be too old to be diagnosed with ADHD?
No, I don't think you're ever too old. I think the caveat being, if you want to be. I think that, if it's not occurred to you to have a diagnosis and you don't know anything about ADHD and someone starts telling you should have one, that might not be the best thing. But for me, as a psychologist, having self-awareness, information, knowledge, that's power. That helps you make changes, understand yourself, use your agency to live a good life, whatever age you are. And I think particularly as we get older and we are confronted maybe with different kind of caregivers, systems, whether that be the doctors, hospitals, if you know you have ADHD, it's really important that you can then, as more people in the professional world get educated about this, that you can say, I'm ADHD. So if they see you being more emotionally dysregulated, if you are having challenges, if you're in a setting where you might have to be waiting for quite a long time, you're getting impatient and angry, it's really important that you're not just seen as someone being really rude. You might be actually feeling quite anxious, agitated, needing to move around. If someone understands that you've got that, you've got a diagnosis and you can communicate that, you will be perceived differently. You are probably quite likely as well to avoid or minimize the chances of getting misdiagnosed as something. And you might get information, as we get older, if you think if you can never be too old, you don't want someone thinking you've heard the information, especially if you're not showing any signs of cognitive decline and you are fully with it. But of course, with ADHD, if you can't retain all the information, particularly medical information, being able to say to someone that, can you give me the leaflet? Can you write it down? Can I have someone, else with me to take that information is really important. And if you don't know that that's a challenge, you may not do that. You may unlikely to advocate for yourself through that filter and understanding. So I'd say you're never too old, ever. But equally, it can come, it's a mixed experience initially. So I'd always put a bit of a health warning on, saying it's not this amazing thing instantly. It's very helpful, but there's also the chance that there will be some grief in there and some remorse and some if onlys, and that can be healthy. But I don't want to suggest it's this, great, get a diagnosis and, someone be shocked in later life, but definitely not too old, no, providing you know what you're getting yourself into and how to use it.
Got this image of a group of 100-year-olds sat around a dinner table with a sherry.
I like the idea.
Unpicking their life, just all being diagnosed that week and having that in common.
Imagine. I mean, you can find your tribe. There's so, certainly now with the online world and so many things and, that understanding and being able to make sense of so much. You could potentially, yes, there may be some grief inevitably and what ifs and sadness, but also stuff that we've been, not been able to let go of or understand. That's a gift that is priceless.
It's almost quite a nice closure if you are at that late stage. To have that sort of line in the sand, this is why all those decisions were made. And to have that closure. I am not a failure.
Yes. I am not stupid or lazy or whatever the range of beliefs that we've carried, the shame, to be able to go, it makes sense. That can be very healing. So do it.
Amazing. Thanks, Jo. I want to do the ADHD agony aunt. It's a very hot day. I'm hoping my sweat doesn't cause the machine to drop out of my hand like it did last summer. The ADHD agony aunt, you're very familiar with it.
Yeah.
It's called the washing machine of woes because I always leave my laundry in the machine. I think I've asked you before and you said that you don't leave your laundry in the machine?
No, I don't tend to.
No.
On occasion, no. I try that and my brain doesn't let go of it too much. No, it's like, yeah.
I am using the Tiimo app, which is a productivity app that reminds me. So I am getting...
There's plenty of other things I do forget, by the way. Don't get me wrong. It's just not necessarily that one. It's definitely happened. But...
This week, Jo, in the washing machine, someone has written in and asked, I'm terrible at planning for my future because, truthfully, I don't associate with the future me at all. I only think about the now. Is this normal? And what can I do to help out the future me, which will one day come?
Well, yes, it's normal. To the person asking the question, you can put your mind at rest there. It's a very common one. And I think that it's great that you're even asking the question, because it means that you are aware the future's there and there are things that would help you to do in the here and now. And what I'll say to people, it's really not uncommon for people not to be able to visualize themselves in the future. Like literally, I'll say, what can you see? Like, I don't know, nothing, I'm kind of here. So it is genuinely a real challenge for people. So what I'll often say is, what you can do is externalize time. If you need to use a kind of an image of someone else in the future, think of your parent, think of whatever else will help you externalize it so it doesn't have to be you. You think, okay, what does that person need in the future? So, I mean, in the basic sense, they're going to need somewhere to live, some money to eat, some physical health, mental health. And then you can start going, okay, well, what would be important to do now to get in the bank? So you start developing habits. Don't wait for the motivation. Don't wait for the time when you go, I'm now going to start planning. That day may well never come. So just start thinking about what are the basics that I think that future self, my future self, and if it helps to be externalize them from yourself, do whatever needs to be done, and just go, right, health, relationships, money, work, and start banking habits across those. And don't worry, because it can be really daunting in any of those areas if you've particularly neglected or struggled with one of them, let's say money, to go, I'm never going to have enough. Don't worry. Doing something is better than nothing. So again, if you start getting anxious, that's going to keep you from planning. Whereas don't worry about the final number. Don't worry what you haven't done. Just put £10, £100, £1,000, whatever you can do, and just create a habit. And then you do it and it's done. Don't try and do everything at once, because that's going to be too overwhelming and you'll lose interest. If it's health and you've never done anything like going to the gym and you're eating unhealthily, just start tackling one of those things. And then you make it a habit and it's happening without you thinking over time. So it's thinking of the essentials, and then you might find you start elaborating and it gets easier to plan. But I think it's about externalizing it and just doing something practical.
Sure.
Because otherwise we feel very overwhelmed. And also it's sensible. ADHD people are always to just start going, well, I'm going to do something. Because often the irrational thing to do is like, can't imagine it, I won't do anything. I'll forget about it, avoid it. But of course, that's the stuff that will end up keeping you up at night. And also putting you at risk. Because you've abused your body, you've not done things to give yourself stability professionally or in a relationship or in a home or whatever that might be for you, to put down some anchors.
I guess it's similar to Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
So I guess the ADHD way of managing the hierarchy is by taking very small steps and not overwhelming yourself. And otherwise, because if the foundational, your general safety, your roof over your head, food in your mouth, is that foundation shakes, then everything else is going to fall down. Yeah. And not overwhelming yourself and just breaking those icebergs up into ice cubes and doing. You almost sort of create mini deadlines as well, which are great for firing up the ADHD mind. Self-care, but in bite-sized chunks. Yeah, and it's interesting. I was listening to something somewhere, I think it was earlier today on a news thing or a program about finance and AI, and someone was talking about, I don't know what app they were using or some software, and they were saying, I just say to it, put my financial goals in. How much am I going to need to save each week or day or year, for whatever their financial goal would be? And it came up with, you need to save this much a week. So again, the heavy lifting can be done nowadays by AI a lot of the time. Just ask that question. If that's 20 quid a week, putting into some, and what's the highest interest account that's on the market? If you don't want to do the legwork of that, some people love doing that. But if you don't, just use simple things that make it less onerous and then do it. It's much easier nowadays to do that than before, having to go find time to go to the branch in the high street. You can validate things online now. So trying to do things and doing exercise, doesn't have to be in a gym.
It can be at a park. There's lots of different ways we can do things, loads of free online things. So just start doing the small things rather than everything all at once, which is very ADHD.
Yes,
and then going, oh my gosh, too big, can't cope.
Yeah.
So small incremental habits, because you don't want to be relying on yourself to make fresh decisions all the time, because that's just probably just not going to happen. Don't make it so big that you have to really start something. Small, do it while an impulsivity wave, use that energy to do something, and then it's done. You set the direct debit up or the exercise routine up, buddy up, do what you need to do, and just eat an apple a day rather than overhauling your whole diet. And that apple might then mean you eat one bit less of chocolate and see what happens.
Yeah.
But once you've got the habits in, they become automatic.
And compound positively over time.
Positively. It's that super powerful thing. It's that small degrees of change. And if I ask one of my clients who is very disciplined, they may well be the ADHD, but they've got that bit where they're and I said, it would not occur to them not to do the things that are in their routine. They may struggle with a whole range of other things, but for them that might be I meditate every morning, or I go to the gym every day at whatever time, because it's just habit. They're not going, I really love going to the gym every day. It just would feel alien to not. They're just not thinking about it. And then it's easy. It may have been hard for them once, but that's what we want to strive for. So we're not thinking about it. It's seamless.
Amazing advice. Thank you,
Good
Jo.
luck with it. Good luck planning for the future. You'll feel better for it.
Just finally, I want to deliver you a letter that was written by the previous guest, where they wrote their 3 rules to live by. I'm going to deliver the letter to you, Jo, and if you could kindly read it out.
3 rules to live by. Focus on what's truly right. Empathise with those around you. Impute quality in everything you do. So apply quality in everything you do. I definitely subscribe to that.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Jo,
Thank you.
as always, absolute pleasure. So much wisdom. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Alex. It's always a joy having these rich conversations. So thank you.